So like you, I got my Mobula6 Freestyle HD in the mail, the real one, finally. There's a long delay on this thing. I really liked it out of the box, except for, actually I found a lot of things that I would change, and let's get into that. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I want to suggest that we change. It's really hard to get one of these things perfect because I mean, we're all pretty picky about this stuff. But just to give you a general idea of all the things that I'm going to suggest, we need to have a better way to hold the antenna. So right here, I've got a 3D printed little antenna holder, and that's going to be available in the description. I've got antenna retention glue right here. I've got camera mounting glue on here to keep this from falling out. I've got a foam pad underneath the camera holder to protect the board and the camera. And let's see what else. We've routed the ExpressLRS antenna kind of underneath there for better protection and range and all that stuff. And last but not least, lots of firmware tweaks and also VTX firmware tweaks. So let's get into it. All right, so first up, E6000. This is a special kind of glue that's kind of rubbery and it's forgiving, and it peels off when you're done with it. And we use this a ton for whoops, for repairs, for holding things down. This tube I got from WeBleedFPV, and what's cool is it's got this really thin applicator on it. But you can also get huge tubes of it on Amazon. I don't care what you do, get some, all right? So we're going to use this, and I'm going to show you how to use it. We want to apply glue here around the UFL, not inside the UFL obviously, but around the UFL to kind of hold it down. And we also want to apply glue. You take this camera out, all right? You take this camera out of its little sleeve there, and we're gonna put some glue on the back side of the camera mount, kind of where I've got this placed right here on the back side, and then we're gonna put the camera back in and kind of hold that sucker in there because we don't want it popping out. I did notice when I had some falls onto concrete and onto harder surfaces, it was possible for this camera to kind of back away out of the case. And we don't want that. I also put just a tiny little fillet of glue right here, all right? Less is more, you don't need a lot, and that'll keep it from popping out. The other thing I did is I took the foam out of the box that this drone comes in. At the bottom of the box, there's a really thin piece of foam. I cut it out with some scissors, and I put it underneath the mount here. So just enough to kind of cover this middle section of the camera mount. And then you just screw it back down, and that is going to provide a lot of protection for the camera and for the board underneath of it. And I suspect we are going to have a much healthier AIO that's going to take hits a lot better with just a little bit piece of foam right there. Very simple to do. I do think it changed the camera angle a little bit, put it down just a little bit. So instead of 25 degrees, it's probably 20-ish, 23 degrees, something like that, but pretty close. Next up, we're gonna get this 3D print. Happy Model actually designed this print and sent it to me, and they're gonna have it on their website, and it's gonna come like this in the future. And so what it does is it's a retention to keep the antenna from going into the ducts here, and it's exactly what we need. It's very thin, simple, and it also pops the antenna up, which is better for reception, so that's pretty cool. It's definitely something that was missed and should have been included in the first release of this thing. You might be asking, well, why don't you just route the antenna over the board and maybe put it around the camera? If you let the antenna go over the board, it will reduce your range. You'll get a lot more breakup closer to you than you would expect. I found this in my testing. With this change, having it route straight out of the board and not go over it, I get as good a range with this as I do with any of the 200 milliwatt VTXs from HDZero. So yeah, it's a little thing, but definitely don't route the antenna over top the board. Okay, so I think that covers the kind of mechanical changes that I would make to this. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Route the wires for the camera over top instead of underneath. It kind of bugs me when people route the antenna, the wires under the camera. That's how it comes from the factory, and that's not a good way to do it. Also, I put a little bit of a twist on the wires, which is good for the analog signal. It's an HD signal, but it is still over a single wire, and you want to twist the wires for signal integrity. And then, before I forget, there's also a good way to kind of route your ExpressLRS antenna through this canopy like that. All right. I will say, if you wanted a little bit more protection on the top of the Lux cam, you could just take a healthy heaping of E6000 and kind of put it on the corners, and that'll be like a little bumper to protect the top of the camera. I don't think the camera is going to be in that much danger. This thing is super light, and that is like an ABS housing. Should be pretty strong, but there you go. Let's get into the software changes now. So there's some important ExpressLRS changes we need to make. To do that, we're going to go into System and then open our ExpressLRS Lua script. And then once we're in here, I recommend a packet rate of 250 Hertz. Use race telemetry. That'll turn off telemetry while you're flying, but keep it while you're on the ground. Hybrid switch mode. And then if you've got like a Gemini module like I do, I run it just with one antenna. And then model match off, TX power, keep it low. Keep it at like 50 milliwatt. We're flying a Whoop here. If you set this thing to 1 watt, you're going to cause interference with the goggles. And then VTX admin, this will get people, sometimes they'll set power level to something other than dash, and then they won't get video on the screen. All right, so that is it. The other thing is take a look at your version on your transmitter. Mine is 351. There are issues with different versions of ExpressLRS. On the TX, I found that 351 works well with 351 Betaflight. 3.3 ExpressLRS on the TX works well on the Betaflight 4.4.2. So that's what I do. You can run 500 Hertz. You can't run 333. You can't run any of the D modes. You can't run 1000. I think in ExpressLRS 4.6, they are adding in more of the faster modes, but this is what it is for now. All right. First up, we need to update the firmware on this thing. Unfortunately, it ships out of the box with firmware that doesn't even support the Lux camera. So we're going to go to HDZero.com, go to support and download. And then inside of download, we're going to go down to VTX firmware, and we're going to download the entire zip file here. Do not download the AIO5 file. That's going to be like hex files for Betaflight, that kind of thing. And we're going to get to that later, all right? So click here. Okay, so now we need to unzip this. And I want you to unzip the AIO5 file. So let's extract this guy. And we want this HDZero_tx.bin in the AIO5 directory. There's two ways we can do this firmware update. We can use the good old trusty goggle cable. And honestly, I'd recommend you use that. Or we can use the super fancy USB programmer tool. But that requires Windows. So I'm just going to show you how to do it the old-fashioned way. Actually, I lost the cable. Here's the USB firmware update tool. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to blow through this. Plug this into the VTX, plug the other end, which will be a different end than this, into your goggle. Copy this bin file to the SD card's top directory, the root directory. Insert it into the goggle, go to the firmware page, go to update VTX. Update VTX takes 1 second, it beeps, you're done. Okay, so now you got your firmware updated on the VTX that's built into the AIO5. That'll be version 1.7 at the time of this video. And that adds support for the Lux camera, which is what you need. All right, next up, we're going to connect this to Betaflight and update the firmware. It ships with Betaflight 4.4.2, and that has trouble with things like arming. And I don't like that, so we're going to go to Betaflight 4.5.1, which is going to be one of the more current ones as at the time I'm recording this. Some of the arming issues I think are related to ExpressLRS and how it handles the disarm state to the arm state. I don't know all the details, just update the firmware, please. So I'm on 4.5.1. I'll show you how to get to that. We're going to go to update firmware, and then I set mine to development. I don't know if that'll be necessary, but you can do the same if you want. You can click on detect. It's going to detect it as a Crazy Bee F4 SX1280, and then we want to pick 4.5.1 here. All these settings, and then flash. When you do flash, it's going to ask you if you want to make a backup. I do recommend you do that. And then we're going to connect. I'm not going to flash it because I already did, but let's go ahead and reconnect. Okay, so imagine we have flashed and we're reconnected. The next thing I want you to do is I'm going to put up a link to my backup. So you're going to go to presets, and then you're going to do load backup, and then you're going to pick the preset file that I supply that's got the right tune and all the right settings that I found work the best. And it's similar to stock, but it's got some tweaks in it that the Betaflight team actually recommended, so I think you'll really like it. So that's it, we're done. Firmware updated, VTX firmware updated, and some mechanical tweaks to make this thing work better. Enjoy. Let me know how it goes for you. Check the link, all the links that I have in the description. Have fun.